Hey, and welcome back to my channel. Today I am doing something that I have been thinking about for a long time, but I have never done it before, and that is a gum paste comparison test. As I'm sure you know, I have my own gum paste recipe that I have been using for years and years, but I was curious about how I performed versus other gum pastes, including Nicholas Lodge's, which I think is the same as what Maggie Austin uses, and also Suzanne Esper's pre-made gum paste. So I'm going to be testing the 3 gum pastes for 7 different characteristics, and we're going to see which one comes out on top. Who knows, I might be changing my gum paste after this. Before we get to the video, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and let's get to testing. So the 7 things we are going to be talking about today are: number 1, how easy is it to obtain the ingredients or order the gum paste? Number 2, the main color of the gum paste, so how white is it really? And then also, what does it look like when we've kneaded some color through? Number 3, we are going to be talking about the texture, so we'll see how sticky or how dry or brittle the gum pastes are. Number 4, we're going to talk about drying speed, so I'm going to make a few flowers in every single gum paste type, and then we'll see how quickly they dry. Number 5 is fragility. I want to see, once the flowers are made, how prone are they to breaking? So I think I'll have to drop some flowers and just see what happens. Number 6 is dusting. I want to know how easily they pick up the dust and also how smoothly the dust applies to each of the petals. Number 7 is the overall ease of use. So was this gum paste really easy to work with, very intuitive feeling, or did I have to struggle with it in order to get it to work? We'll see. After I've reviewed those 7 characteristics, I will give you my verdict, and hopefully that will help you decide which gum paste is right for you. Because maybe one gum paste is right for one person and one is better for another person, so I just want to give you all the options possible. All right, let's get into the testing. The first factor we're going to talk about is ingredient availability. So I think the obvious winner here is Nicholas Lodge's recipe, because there are only 4 ingredients, which are egg whites, powdered sugar, Tylose powder, and shortening. My recipe has a few more ingredients, including gelatin, the gum tragacanth, and meringue powder. There are workarounds, but I think that Nicholas Lodge's recipe is the easiest, especially if you're just starting out and you're not really willing to invest in a lot of different ingredients. So I think that one is the clear winner. Suzanne Esper's gum paste is available online, and thank you to her for sending me some so I could give it a try. However, it was sold out when I just checked if it was in stock, so that is a factor. If you're unable to get that gum paste, you would have to make your own anyway. The second thing we're going to compare today is color. So I want to do 2 comparisons. One is the whiteness of the starting product, and then the second is going to be how well it takes on just some regular gel paste. I'm going to use this Sugar Flare Claret color. So upon first impressions, I think the Nicholas Lodge one is winning here. It is the whitest out of all of the 3. I don't know if you'll be able to see that on screen. It's pretty subtle, but this one is definitely slightly whiter. I think mine and Suzanne Esper's are about the same color of like creamy white. That probably has something to do with the gum tragacanth that is incorporated into both of our recipes. I think one way you could combat this off-white color, if you need it to be a little bit whiter, is just to add a little bit of white gel paste, and that should bring it to a nice crisp white if you need it. Next, I'm going to color some with this claret. I'm going to try and use about the same amount for each of the 3, and we'll see how they look. I'll start by coloring my own gum paste here with the claret. So there is my gum paste with the claret added. Let's do the next 2. This one is Nicholas Lodge's. This one's a bit tougher to knead. There is an option in this gum paste to add a smaller or larger amount of CMC. I added about a medium amount. I think it's at 27 to 30 grams, and I think I added about 28.5. So maybe next time if I added a little bit less, it wouldn't be quite as tough to knead. And I know his recipe is formulated specifically for the type of Tylose powder that he has, and I just use my usual brand, so that could play another factor. I think that is pretty good. It did not turn quite as dark, and I think I used the same, if not a little bit more color. So that's just something to note. Finally, do a little piece for Suzanne Esper's. Texture-wise, this one feels like it's right in between mine and Nicholas Lodge's in terms of gumminess. So that one was much easier to knead through. Let's take a look at the three next to each other. So here is mine. This one is Nicholas Lodge's and Suzanne Esper's. So I think in terms of coloring, both mine and Suzanne Esper's have about the same hue. It was much easier to incorporate the color, and I think just because it was less gummy, the color incorporated better. This one is not quite as dark in color, and it doesn't feel quite as saturated. I think it's just a bit too gummy in order to really absorb that color properly. And between mine and Suzanne Esper's, I do prefer mine in terms of adding color. My hands are not as tired from kneading this one, and I found it came together a little bit nicer than the Suzanne Esper's one, although this is a close second. The third thing I want to compare today is texture. So that is just the way that each gum paste feels after you've kneaded it a little bit. So first of all, mine, when it just comes out of the fridge, is a little bit crumbly almost. This is kind of what it looks like. It's not super smooth. You just have to knead it in order for it to come together. Nicholas Lodge's straight out of the fridge looks like this. So quite similar. It's not together immediately. You do have to knead it in order for it to come together. And it is a little bit tougher feeling. It feels almost like marshmallow. And finally, Suzanne Esper's. Hers is not refrigerated, so this is just at room temperature. And hers feels a little bit gummy, similar to Nicholas Lodge's, but I would say hers is right in the middle between the more marshmallowy gummy texture of Nicholas Lodge's and mine, which is quite soft. So I think hers is a happy medium for texture. And let me show you what it looks like once you've kneaded it through. So this one is mine, and it is quite soft. You don't really have to fight with it. It just needs, it doesn't stretch super far, but I would say it's definitely the most pliable and the softest. And it feels like it's gonna hold the texture the best once I begin using like a veining tool or a silicone veiner, but we will see. So that is what mine looks like. Next up, Nicholas Lodge's. So I think you'll see immediately that this one is quite a bit tougher. It takes a bit more strength in order to knead it out and stretch it out. And with my gum paste, I find if you roll it together like this, it'll come into a fairly smooth ball, whereas this one will not. Again, could just be the brand of CMC or Tylose powder that I used, but that is my experience with this one. Finally, Suzanne Esper's. And in terms of texture, it does have a little bit more suppleness than the Nicholas Lodge one. It's not quite as hard to knead on your hands. And this feels like a very nice texture. I would be happy working with a gum paste like this. It feels a little bit stretchier than mine, which could be a good thing, especially if you're just starting out and you need a little bit more stretchiness. I know some people find that mine falls apart a little bit too easily, so this could definitely be a good option. Next, what I'm gonna do is make some flowers, and I'm going to see how they all turn out, my impressions as I use them each. So I am using my classic spray rose technique here, and you can find that in the description box below. I will link the free tutorial for that. But this is my gum paste we're starting with here, and it's very easy to cut. It was very easy to roll, which is not surprising since it's quite a bit softer than the other two. And I will just use my regular technique, and I will show you what it looks like at the end. I find my gum paste quite easy to texture. I don't have to add great amount of pressure in order to get a nice vein. And that goes also for using the ball tool. Not a ton of pressure needed. It's quite easy to manipulate my gum paste. I mean, I'm very used to working with it, so I think that could definitely play a huge part. It basically just does what I want it to do. which is all I can really ask for in a gum paste. Tell me in the comments if you have any other gum paste recipes that you have tried out and loved or would like me to try out and compare. Or maybe if you've had success with the Nicholas Lodge one, let me know which CMC you used and how you got that to work for you, because so far it does seem a little bit tough for me. But I do think that is just the difference in brands for the Tylose powder. But I know I prefer a gum paste with gum tragacanth. The texture for me is just superior in terms of workability, and the intuitiveness just always feels like I know what it's going to do, and I put it somewhere and it just stays when I use the gum tragacanth as opposed to just CMC. But I know that it's not easy to find everywhere, so I would like to come up with some other options for people who can't find it. I do like that I'm able to kind of tear my gum paste, which I do quite often with different flowers to add more texture. But that could be a deterrent for you. Maybe you don't want to tear anything, and in which case you'd probably want something a little bit sturdier than mine. I'm just gonna allow this one to dry sideways while I make the next two. Next, I'm doing Nicholas Lodge's. I find that this one doesn't roll out quite as thin. You could probably roll it an extra number on the pasta machine to a number 6 instead of a number 5, just because it is a little bit kind of thicker, a little bit tougher, so I guess it doesn't really keep its shape when you're rolling it thin. A little trickier to cut as well. I do find it is like quite a bit thicker for me than what I'm used to. And yeah, I'm having a little bit of trouble just getting those clean cuts because it's just a bit tougher. So I find this one almost bounces back when I'm trying to thin it out. It does require quite a bit more pressure. However, I think it's gonna be better for not like tearing quite as easily. So maybe if you have issues with your petals tearing on you, this could be a good option. So I have found that it hasn't held the veining quite as well as mine does, but I do find it to be a little bit more forgiving in that it's a bit stretchier, so you don't have to be quite as delicate with it. You don't have to worry about everything tearing quite as much, which could definitely help beginners when they're just starting out with flowers. I am finding it's a little bit bulkier because it hasn't thinned out quite as nicely as mine, just using the pasta machine, since it bounces back a little bit. So the base is quite a bit bulkier than what I'm used to, and I'm not able to get those like really fine edges. It's just a little bit less refined for me, I think. And to be totally fair with this gum paste recipe, I know that people have struggled with my recipe because of the amounts of CMC that you should use and the different brands that are available out there. There's just such a wide variety of strengths for all of these different products. The moral of the story is that you need to experiment with what you have available in your part of the world, what products you can access, and that will determine the ultimate quality of your gum paste. So don't just take the recipe and think that it's gonna work perfectly the first time. Unfortunately, that's usually not how it goes. You have to experiment a couple times, give it a few tries, and make adjustments for what you can get. All right, let's do the last one, and then we can compare the 3 and also kind of see how they're beginning to dry. On to the final rose here, and this is Suzanne Esper's gum paste. It does seem slightly thinner than the Nicholas Lodge gum paste. Not totally smooth like Nicholas Lodge's as well. Not super easy to cut, but let's see how it is to texture. I find with some of these cutters, when I'm trying to cut that thicker gum paste like Nicholas Lodge's or Suzanne Esper's, I must have to add a lot more pressure because I'm not getting through on those more detailed areas. So just something to note. And as I suspected, this one is right in the middle in terms of the amount of pressure to add in order to get a nice thin petal. And let's see how it is for veining. Yeah, I think it is right in the middle as well. A little trickier than mine to vein, but I think it's gonna hold together a little better. You won't get any torn edges like you can get with mine, which is a little bit more delicate. This gum paste would be really good for wiring flowers because it's not gonna be as prone to tearing or the wire poking through. I think it's gonna hold up a little bit better for that if you are a beginner and you are struggling with with adding wires into your petals or your leaves. This one again is a little bit thicker in terms of the base. The gum paste didn't roll out quite as thin as mine using number 5 on the pasta machine. So also think about that when you are following my instructions. If you are using a different gum paste, you might have to roll it thinner on the pasta machine that I'm rolling it to. So I go to a number 5, but maybe if you're using one of these gum pastes that's a little bit thicker, go to a 6 or a 7. Definitely less tearing. If I did this to my gum paste, it would be already torn. So it could be fun to play with though, to get a little bit of extra texture. I just think if I was making a bunch of flowers with this thicker gum paste, I would just be kind of frustrated because it's not thinning out quite as quickly as I'm used to. But I think for other people that might be a plus. So I'm done all 3 flowers. I'm gonna allow them to dry just for a little bit and then we're gonna see what they look like. I've allowed these all to dry overnight and very interesting things have happened. The one made with Suzanne's gum paste has not completely hardened. It still has like a tiny bit of movement to it, which is interesting. I've never really used a gum paste that didn't dry totally hard. Nicholas Lodge's and mine have both dried completely and are very hard. I also kept the tiny samples of the gum paste, and that does reflect my findings as well for the flowers. The Suzanne Esper one is still kind of soft, which is interesting. I'm not sure what the ingredient is in there that keeps it soft, but it is. And then mine and Nicholas Lodge's are quite solid. So that's something to think about when you are choosing your gum paste. Another thing on color is that Suzanne Esper's stayed the darkest. So mine, I always know that I have to color it a few shades darker in order to get a nice saturated color. So if I were making this flower and I wanted it to be this dark, I know I would have to add a little bit more color. Hers stayed very dark, almost the same color as when we made it yesterday. So that is very interesting and definitely a point for her in the color department. The Nicholas Lodge one is still pretty dull. It has just such a strange color to it. It's like dull and almost has like a bit of like a grayish yellow. Like, I don't know, it didn't really absorb the color as I would have liked. So for color, Suzanne is definitely the winner. Mine second, because it's still like a pretty pure pink, but it definitely lightened up over time. And then Nicholas Lodge's in third, because it didn't really absorb the color as I would want it to. And as for drying speed, I think mine was able to dry fairly quickly because the petals were thin. However, I do think with more of the CMC in there and it being a tougher recipe, Nicholas Lodge's might have ended up drying quickly as well. So in terms of which dries faster, I think it's fairly irrelevant. They both dried completely overnight, and I think that I would be happy with the finished product of both of these in order to dust and put on a cake. Next, in terms of fragility, I think that mine is probably the most fragile because I was able to get the petals thinnest. So it is difficult to say if I were able to get the petals thinner on these, which would be more fragile. But I think mine is definitely the most fragile at this point. And then I think it's probably a toss-up between these two because the petals are both thicker. I would be concerned about this only because the petals just don't feel as solid as I'm used to. But I know that some people have more flexible gum paste recipes and they work great for them. So I'm not sure. If you know in the comments, let me know if you've had any Suzanne Esper flowers laying around for a while, how they end up in the end, if they're fragile or if they're nice and solid. Next thing we will cover is dusting. I'm gonna get my dusts out and I'm gonna dust these guys quickly and I'll let you know how they turned out. I've got 2 colors here. This one is claret, so it matches exactly with the gel paste that we used, and this one is called Black Magic. I will test out both of them, but I think they're very similar in case you're looking for a dust that's around this color. So I think the claret is a little bit more purple. This one has a little bit more of like a muted burgundy kind of note to it. I will begin dusting mine. So I'm going for a hue that is just a touch darker than my gum paste is. So I'm just trying to add in those shadows basically and give it some dimension. Got a few broken petals here. As suspected, I usually have just a little bit on every flower. So maybe I could add a little bit more CMC into my gum paste and that could prevent that from happening. Just an illustration of like how you can adjust your recipe depending on what you prefer. So I'm not trying to go crazy with the dusts here. I'm just getting into all the shadowy areas and then grabbing those edges with some dust as well. All right, happy with that. Let's move on to Suzanne Espers now. Wondering if I might need to go a bit darker with this because the gum paste did end up slightly darker. So I did add some cornstarch, but I'm making it slightly more saturated here. This feels pretty sturdy. It really doesn't feel like any of these petals are going to break. I mean, that is probably a function of them being thicker than mine. But I would say that the fact that they're not completely solid and like dried totally isn't really taking away from the structural integrity of it. I'm not finding the dust to go on quite as smoothly for some reason. Yeah, I think it's not what I'm used to for dusting. The dust doesn't really apply the same way. And also you can see here where I added a bit of gum glue is still visible, whereas there are no visible spots on my flower or the one with Nicholas Lodge's gum paste. So it's interesting. It didn't really absorb that. On to Nicholas Lodge's. So this one, I'm gonna use a slightly lighter dust. Just add a touch more cornstarch in there because it's a lighter flower. This feels like when I'm dusting it, it feels a lot more like my own gum paste recipe in terms of the, I guess, texture. It's almost like porcelain or ceramic feeling. Just adding a little extra dust since it didn't really turn out quite as dark. Alrighty, all done with this one. Let's take a look. Here are the final 3 flowers post dusting. So let me know what you think in the comments. Which one is your favorite of these 3? I think the color of Suzanne Espers is really the nicest because it's really super saturated still. It didn't lose any saturation as it dried. I prefer the texture of mine because I was able to get it slightly thinner. However, it's more fragile, so maybe adding a little extra CMC would help with that. Overall dusting, I did find that mine and Nicholas Lodge's behaved very similarly. They both felt nice and sturdy and like porcelain-like or ceramic-like. I wasn't really worried about them breaking or anything. For Suzanne Espers, I found that the glue didn't, I used some gum glue. It kind of stayed on the flower, which is really weird for me. That doesn't usually happen. I guess that's just the formulation. And I did also find the dust, it didn't apply it like I'm used to. There feels like to be some splotchy areas and some areas that I had trouble getting dust to stick on at all. Yeah, just some things to think about. I think that each of these definitely has a place depending on what you're looking for in a gum paste. For ease of use, I do think that mine was the easiest to use. I felt like I had to fight with it the least, and I didn't have to use so much hand power in order to knead it out or roll it out or anything like that. The other 2 I did feel like I was fighting with a little bit. It didn't feel quite as intuitive for me. That could be a function of me being used to using my own gum paste. I've been using it for years, so I think it's gonna be personal preference, but I think that mine is definitely the softest to use. For number 1, ordering ingredients in Nicholas Lodge's is definitely the easiest, and I would give mine a number 2 because you can get the ingredients in multiple places, whereas Suzanne Espers gum paste can be a little bit trickier to find or it could be out of stock. Number 2, color. Nicholas Lodge's was the whitest, and when color is added, I think that Suzanne Espers was probably the best because it kept the color throughout the drying process, which is something that I need to think about when I'm making my gum paste in different colors. I need to add more color and then it will dry and lighten up slightly. So that is something that you have to keep in mind when you're coloring your gum paste, how it's gonna end up when it's dried. Number 3, texture. I am going to give my gum paste the win here. It was definitely the easiest to knead, roll, use my ball tool on, and texture using a veining tool. And I think it did keep the texture the best because it was slightly softer. Number 4, drying speed. Both mine and Nicholas Lodge's dried completely overnight, whereas Suzanne Esper's did not dry overnight. It's still a little bit malleable. However, that could be a plus if you prefer that type of gum paste. I am used to working with my gum paste, which dries totally, so I am comfortable with that as opposed to a slightly malleable gum paste. So I would say mine and Nicholas Lodge's both tie for drying speed. Number 6 is dusting. I am gonna give my own gum paste the win here because it was easiest to dust, and also it picked up on the color evenly, unlike Suzanne's, which I found to be a little bit splotchy when I was dusting. It might just be that I'm used to dusting mine, so other people might know how to dust it better. Let me know in the comments below if you have any tips. And then finally, number 7, ease of use. I am gonna give my gum paste the win for that as well. I just found it the easiest to manipulate, the easiest to knead, and to basically like do all of my texturing, which is the most important thing for me when I'm choosing a gum paste. Overall, I think I'm not gonna change my gum paste anytime soon, but I might think about adding a little extra CMC if I want it to have more structure, and that is something you can do if you are trying out my gum paste or anybody's gum paste and you find it doesn't have enough structure, it's breaking too much, or it's falling apart. Add a little extra CMC. If it starts drying out, add a little water and you'll be good to go. Thank you so much for watching this video on gum paste comparison. Let me know in the comments if there is a gum paste you want me to try out next. And please don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like this video, and I will see you next time.